If you've been watching The Acolyte right now, you probably know it's not quite going the way that Disney or Leslye Headland thought that this was going to go. It's been a rough watch. It's very hard to follow the story. It's hard to understand what anybody's real motivation is. And whenever we finally got to see something happen with some of the characters, and, it didn't really matter because we weren't connected to them any significant way. There's been no real character development, and it's just kind of pushing along the plot. But we do have a little bit of news coming with The Acolyte. Bounding into comics, The Acolyte showrunner Leslye Headland stands behind Qimir bathing scene. From a narrative perspective, it had to happen. It had to. This was a very uncomfortable scene that seemed like it was just shoehorned into the episode for no reason. We get the shot of Qimir disrobing as Osha creepily watches him from behind some rocks. It was a very strange thing to have cut into the show, but let's go ahead and jump into the article and kind of see what we're looking at here. According to The Acolyte showrunner Leslye Headland, the nude Qimir bathing scene featured in The Acolyte's most recent episode was not just included solely for fan service, but primarily because it was absolutely necessary to the series' narrative. Alright, hold on a second. Fan service is an interesting way to put this because, as we know, Star Wars is a boy brand that has recently been molded and put through a transitionary period where it's now being touted as a girls brand. Let's see here. One of the opening pieces of the Star Wars series' 6th episode, Teach Corrupt, the scene in question centers on Osha, Amandla Stenberg, as she discovers that following her confrontation with him and her sister May in the last episode, she is now under the care of the dark side wielding Qimir, Manny Jacinto. Following after a couple of minutes watching Qimir disrobe, sink into a local hot spring, and begin to wash himself, Osha approaches his gear and contemplates striking him down with his own lightsaber, which would have been a difficult thing to do from the shore unless she can saber throw, because otherwise she would have had to swim out and could have been this whole awkward thing. But I digress. Poorly written. However, much to her surprise, the villain is already aware of her presence, as just when she places her weapon's hilt in her hand, Qimir calls back, "Feels good, doesn't it?" Taken aback by the question, Osha proceeds to freeze, unsure of how to respond to her captor's surprisingly calm demeanor. Her hesitation palpable, Qimir proceeds to not fight back against Osha, but instead wax poetic to her about his philosophy regarding the Force, the Jedi, and the true power of the dark side. Because in this show, it seems that what they're trying to push is this idea that the dark side is not evil and that it's just another perspective. We got to hear that during Star Wars Celebration last year when a couple of the actors were on screen and said, "What I love about Star Wars is that there is no good and evil. It's all about your perspective." They're taking something that's a story that we've all loved and taking the foundation of it and morphing it, as they do with everything that they get their hands on. They try to make it to where what it was that we knew and loved is what is wrong with it now. They're pushing their own narrative into it, rather than the classic story of the hero, the good versus evil. No, unfortunately, we're now seeing an amalgamation of some sort of narrative being pushed out in all of this, and it's frankly disgusting. It's not just about ruining the things that we loved, it's about teaching a newer generation a message. Unfortunately for them, a newer generation is not watching what they're trying to push out. In a significant thematic division from Star Wars production, but much to the delight of fangirls everywhere, I don't believe that. I think that's a lie. During this entire first part of the pair's conversation, the camera makes a point to focus, almost the point of reveling in on Qimir's very nude body. And though this extremely thirsty moment seemed out of place, in Headland's opinion, it was absolutely necessary for the series' overall plot. Why? Is the plot a romance? I thought the plot was that there was a Sith, which they came out and told us, so it's not wrong to say that now. A Sith looking for an apprentice. Oh wait, we can't use that word. An acolyte. Pressed during a post-episode 6 interview with Collider's Maggie Lovett as to how far she was allowed to push things and how much skin was shown, Headland explained, "Lucasfilm really believed in my vision. From a narrative perspective, it had to happen. It had to. Lucasfilm didn't believe in anything. Kathleen Kennedy believed in it because Kathleen Kennedy apparently hates Star Wars. I don't know if you guys have seen what Disney's done with the brand since they took over. I know most of you have, but they don't follow this classic story. They're not giving us anything that even aligns with it. It's like they're completely changing what it was. And that's why we say it was a boy brand that everyone was allowed to love and enjoy, but it's now a girl's brand. I've heard several content creators reference that they're trying to turn this into Twilight. And honestly, that's kind of what it looks like. He did like a Steven Seagal neck snap in the previous episode, said the showrunner. How do you get from that to humanity? The only way to do it is to show him in such a wildly vulnerable position, and it has to be visual. I can't think of something more vulnerable than someone holding a lightsaber on someone who's that exposed. I just don't. I felt like he was so merciless in the previous episode that he had to stand in front of her and say, you absolutely can kill me. And that's one of the problems with what they're doing here, right? We're not getting the villains that were fun to watch and fun to see just how ruthless they were. No, they're trying to humanize all of them. They must all be the apologetic villain. But why? Why can't we just have villains like we used to have? Can you imagine if Sauron had a relationship with Galadriel? Or something? Wouldn't that be crazy? Wouldn't that just not make sense? Anyway, I'm at your mercy. It could feel like a put on, but it had to feel like he genuinely was like, totally, you can do this. There's nobody around. No one's gonna judge you for it, so what's up? Headland continued. And again, it feeds in narratively to her decisions of still upholding this. He says, you're wondering if it's honorable to kill me like this. You're still hanging on to the rules. You're hanging on to this code. Listen, part of it is just decency and she's a good person, but I think he's also starting to teach her. He's also starting to go, I deserve this. And it's one of those things where going into this episode, I was somebody who suspected everybody already knew about the Parent Trap situation, okay? There wasn't anybody who was confused about this, like with Soul. He knew it was May. He had the line where he looked at her and said, where is she? And May said, who? And he said, your sister. He didn't throw out any names because he already knew. But I don't want to go in and try to justify some of the decisions that they've tried to make here, because we can theorize all day on what some of the reasons for some of this stuff is, and ultimately it's better theories than what we're actually getting. But go over to Bounding Into Comics and take a read on this article, because it's definitely it's definitely something, and all credit to Bounding. But whenever we look at the Acolyte, if we jump over to the ratings, they're still at a dismal 14% in the audience score, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. I think one of the low points was 12%, but then it probably jumped back up to 14%, and honestly, that's probably where it's going to stay. However, they do have a lot to try to iron out in these last 2 episodes, and I don't really know if they're going to be able to do it. But since we've talked about this, I thought one other fun thing to bring up with the Acolyte would be ScreenRant's article here. 10 real problems with the Acolyte. No, we're not talking about it being woke. It's so bad that even ScreenRant can't just push past how bad it is, and they have to try to take it from a narrative perspective and show us why some of the things that we're seeing aren't adding up. And if you're a fan, you already know why, but let's skim through these real quick before we wrap up here. The Acolyte has received significant backlash, much of it before the show even premiered, but like many Disney Star Wars products, true criticism of The Acolyte is being swallowed up in the outcries about the show's supposed wokeness. The Acolyte is the newest addition to Star Wars movies and TV shows, and it represents a thrilling new era in the Star Wars timeline to be depicted on screen. Set 100 years before Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, The Acolyte explores the High Republic era, the golden age of the Jedi and the Republic, which is a Disney creation. If we just look over what they have here, it should be set further back in the High Republic era. Although it's thrilling that The Acolyte is set in the High Republic era because it's such an underexplored period in the Star Wars timeline. It's underexplored because Disney created it. Especially on screen, this show feels too late in this era. For one, setting The Acolyte just 100 years before the prequels means that there's less room for the show to explore a greater stretch of time. The Acolyte's showrunner Leslye Headland has already confirmed she would be interested in additional seasons, but The Acolyte runs the risk of encroaching upon the prequel trilogy era too much. Like if we saw a character from the prequels that was somehow alive before he was supposed to be alive, and that he was a traitor? Because that would be a glaring mistake to make. The next one. The show may make the Jedi irredeemable. The Acolyte's Jedi seem guilty of something serious, which does appear to be the main plot point in this show. One of the major mysteries of the Acolyte is what truly transpired on Brendok, the planet which the twins Osha and May were born. At first, it seemed as though May had killed the twins' entire family by setting Stone on fire with a book. Anyway, which was the story both Osha and Master Soul told. However, the Acolyte Episode 3 revealed that the truth was much more complicated. While May might have started the fire, the twins' family of witches of Brendok were not burned, they had clearly been killed in some other way. That, combined with May's mission to kill 4 Jedi who had been stationed on Brendok at the time, Indara, Kalnaka, Torben, and Sol, suggested the Jedi may have been involved in the deaths of the witches. In fact, the Acolyte Episode 2 has already implied a significant level of guilt on the part of the Jedi, as Master Torben chose death over confessing what he'd done to the Jedi Council. Which is another just weird plot thing that they're doing here that doesn't seem to make any sense yet. Maybe they'll eventually come out with something that ties it in, but as for right now, a Jedi Master just committed suicide by poison. Characters are dying too quickly. I disagree. In the first episode, we could have seen a lot of killing, or at least some character development, and it might be more interesting. The episodes are too short. Again, I disagree. I've watched all of them 2 to 3 times and planned on making reviews of them, but I can't trouble myself because it just makes my head hurt trying to figure out what the hell is going on. The hot Sith pattern might be a bit too much at this point. Agreed. Stop. It's annoying. Some parallels are too on the nose. What it means by some parallels are too on the nose is that they're stealing quotes from other movies and talking about things that haven't happened yet. It's because they have nowhere to go with this. The writing is terrible, and it's not fun. It's member berries. 8 episodes aren't enough. Well, it's because the storytelling wasn't concise enough that we actually are going anywhere with the story. Some scenes needed better effects. Yes, definitely. The dialogue is a bit superficial at times. Most of the time. And some mysteries are dragging out for far too long. Long enough, in fact, that I don't care about the Wookiee Jedi anymore or anything else going on in this show. I am ready for it to be over. Star Wars is not what it was. And Disney Star Wars is dead. I'm Hayden75. Thank you for coming and checking out this video. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that. Let me know what you thought, and let me know what you think about the Acolyte. Thank you for checking out this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.